Morning, everybody, and welcome to the Vermont Wetlands Program Wetland Mapping webinar today on February 2nd, World Wetlands Day. So thank you for taking the time to learn more about wetlands and wetland mapping in Vermont. It's your small part that you can take in World Wetlands Day and thinking of wetlands and human well-being this year as the theme for World Wetlands Day. And you can check out more on that on the Ramsar Convention of Wetlands website. My name is Laura LaPierre. I'm the Wetlands Program Manager of the Department of Environmental Conservation's Wetlands Program. Today, we're presenting on our mapping work, that our efforts to have better wetland detection in the state of Vermont and across the nation by additions of this mapping to the National Wetlands Inventory, and how you might be able to help us with this mapping project. We'll be also talking about how you might submit your information, and to help me with that, Ryan Knox and Kelsey Bean will be presenting as well to go through some of the details on how you might be able to submit this information. So for a bit of housekeeping, if you haven't been on Teams before, there's ways for you to mute your chat. I did enable your microphone so that you can add comments and such. You may be muted if you're hopping on and aren't muted, and there's some sound just for everybody's experience. There's also a chat box, which Kelsey will be watching while I'm presenting. We will have a time for comments and questions after the presentation. Feel free to be entering that information in as questions come up. Also, we're asking that people turn off their videos so that there's better bandwidth for people who are watching with slower internet speeds. And there's also the option for you to raise your hand to ask a question here in Teams, so you can verbally ask questions and comments and interact with us. Let's see. So with that, I'll jump right into it. So for today, we'll be talking about updating our maps, which this image shows some of the worst case scenarios of our mapping where there was problems with where the wetlands were mapped, missing the mark of where the wetlands are and where we're trying to move things, both registration errors and then just omissions being some of the biggest issues here. So I'll start by talking about why we need wetland mapping and how we're using wetland mapping in the state of Vermont. Some things are obvious, but then there's also advances that we're working on that we want you to be aware of. I'll need to go into the types of maps that we produce within the wetlands program. There's a lot of acronyms to go through. How our mapping was created in the past, how we're working on it into the future, and then Kelsey and Ryan will be helping out with how you can submit delineation information. So the obvious reason for wetland mapping is wetland detection. So we have a lot of mapping information now. There's a good percentage of wetlands that aren't on our maps, the more that we are able to detect and produce on the maps, the more aware the general population is of where our wetlands are. And we're able to create tools to help the public with that. This is our wetlands screening tool, which I believe Kelsey will be putting this in the chat if you'd like to be directed to it on our website, where you can enter an address or a span number for a parcel and get information on the likelihood that there are wetlands and mapping to go along with that. So as we update our maps, this detection tool, the screening tool, as well as landowner knowledge of wetlands will improve over time. So this is the main purpose for us to be updating the maps. And we'll also put in the chat our special wetland map version of the agency's Atlas that is also useful for querying and looking up wetland specific information. We're also using this information to predict wetland function. So in the state of Vermont, we're protecting wetlands based off of significant function and value, which this image here shows the 10 functions and values that by statute we are protecting. And there are tools out there to use high quality mapping to predict different wetland functions. These are the specific called out functions, and our wetland mapping effort will be producing reports with tables that look like this, which will provide information on how many wetlands in a particular watershed might be providing fish habitat or unique wetland plant communities and such, to help with things like basin planning for targeting wetland protection efforts and helping the general public understand the value of the wetlands within their neighborhood. So keep an eye out for these reports coming out. We will have one within the Missisquoi Basin coming out sometime this year. Then in the Missisquoi Basin, for those of you who don't know, is in the northeast corner of the state. Another use is we do wetland biomonitoring. Within the program, we assess wetland health. And having better wetland mapping helps us select sites to be monitoring primarily, helps us find those wetlands that may be really unique and irreplaceable and may be qualifying for Class 1 protections. And also can help us find priority wetland types such as peatlands, disconnected wetlands that may not be federally protected but state protected. And of course helps us with doing conserved land inventories while we're doing our biomonitoring work. We also, within the program, do a great deal of encouraging, coordinating voluntary restoration. And there's a lot of restoration work happening in the state of Vermont. We have a prioritization model that's available through the VSWI wetland map that Kelsey placed in the chat earlier. But this map is only good, or this model is only as good as the base data. And it is using the current wetland mapping that we have. And the advances in our mapping will help us better target where to do wetland restoration on the landscape. to really help us prioritize those best sites so that we can more quickly be doing the good restoration work that partners like the Partners for Fish and Wildlife and U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service and NRCS Wetland Reserve easement program are producing, such as this site here in Leicester, Vermont. So that's a summary of wetland uses. So now I will jump into what mapping products we have for the state of Vermont, and where we come from with the mapping and where we're going with it. So I need to start with a few acronyms that we have going on here. State government has a lot of acronyms, so excuse that. The National Wetlands Inventory is a national map which you can view online. You can download the data. It's managed by the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service and has been for quite a long time, since sometime in the late 60s, I believe it was created. And it has a very specific protocol. Fish and Wildlife Service used to produce this information, but now anybody can submit data to the National Inventory, but it needs to meet their data standards to be accepted. So there's QA and QC quality control done by Fish and Wildlife Service. This is where the Vermont Significant Wetlands Inventory was originally created in 1990, was based off of the NWI. So the VSWI is managed by the Vermont DEC program. It is data that we accept. It is within the wetlands program. It includes regulated wetlands. So if it's on the map, it's either identified as Class 1 or Class 2 protected wetland. And many of those, the wetlands that are protected, aren't on the map. It is an important tool, but it is something that we recognize needs a better inventory of the wetlands. So that's where we're coming from with our mapping project as well. The addition of wetlands onto the VSWI requires a rigorous public notice. You might have seen those up on the environmental notice bulletin, and this is often a 15-day to 30-day public comment period for addition. Thirdly, we have a wetlands advisory layer, and that is also managed by the Vermont DEC, and it includes wetlands that we have detected within the program, both from doing field work and aerial interpretation work that we do. There's no regulatory status associated with it, and we update it quite regularly. This isn't noticed because there's no regulation involved in it. This is simply a layer that's informative with more wetlands on it. It's a nimble tool that we have today that we've been using to add more wetlands so people are more informed on their locations. So we are very much in need of doing a wholesale update of wetland mapping on the state. You can see from this map, a good number of the state really was mapped before email was a common thing. There is a lot of old technology used in this layer for where someone hand drew where wetlands were, and it was later digitized, so it's on GIS. It was definitely informative, really important work. and it is useful, but many wetlands are missing or undermapped because that's what the technology was able to create during that time. So we've had our Vermont Significant Wetlands Inventory since 1990. It was created based off of the National Wetlands Inventory, like I said before. The map was updated wholesale throughout the state through statutory change in 2010. So anywhere that the National Wetlands Inventory was updated by 2010 was updated on the VSWI. The 2010 statutory and rule change also added protection for unmapped wetlands so that we could designate significant wetlands that weren't on the map as protected within the program. In 2018, the program really started adding wetlands to the VSWI for every new wetland associated with a permit, even though we had the authority before in 2010, that wasn't done on a regular basis until we were able to gain capacity and such to do that work. And also in 2018, we more regularly started updating the wetland advisory layer, which was mostly up until that point mapping that was produced for towns information. So various consultants did wetland mapping work. And that was added onto the advisory layer. So in 2019, we completed our first National Wetlands Inventory pilot mapping within the Missisquoi Basin, which I'll show you like right around here for those of you who aren't familiar with river basins. And through 2022 into 2023, we went through a process of updating the rule and doing an entire update of the Vermont Significant Wetlands Inventory based off of that National Wetlands Inventory work that we did. Also in 2023, we received funding both from state and federal sources to create NWI maps for the entire state. So that this is the plan as it is. We are going to complete National Wetlands Inventory update along with additional attributes that give more information about where the water flow path is, where the water sources for these wetlands and such, so that we can do the functional assessment work that I was mentioning earlier. So where we're at right now is we have both the Missisquoi River Basin updated on the National Wetlands Inventory, as well as the Vermont Significant Wetlands Inventory. We just recently received from the University of Vermont Spatial Analyst Lab the Lamoille River Basin wetlands, which are going through U.S. Fish and Wildlife approval process, which that will be completed very soon, I'm sure. And that area will then be added to the national map, and we can start the process of adding some of those wetlands onto the VSWI. By the mid-year this year, it's very exciting. Over 30% of the state will have new National Wetlands Inventory. That may take a few months to go into effect on the national official map, but it will be completed and we will be able to start the process of adding wetlands to the VSWI this year. By the end of this year, nearly 80% of the NWI mapping will be completed, and we'll basically have all statewide national wetlands inventory completed as we come into 2026. So it's very exciting work being done by the UVM Spatial Analyst Lab and the Geospatial Services at St. Mary's University of Minnesota, with quality control by the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. So it's important to note that the National Wetlands Inventory is different from the Vermont Significant Wetlands Inventory, which is the S that makes it different. So we're only adding jurisdictional wetlands to this map layer. So the National Wetlands Inventory is looking at detection of all wetland features, including ponds and rivers and streams, that can be detected at a 1 to 8,000 scale. Not all of these found areas are considered state-regulated wetlands or state significant. So we need to filter what's in the NWI for addition to the VSWI. So we're not including manure pits and ponds created in upland. Those are exempt. We're removing deep water habitats. That's a separate state regulation. And we are making sure to add significant wetlands, which are wetlands that meet one of the categories in section 4.6 of the Vermont Wetland Rules. If they're over half an acre, vernal pool, connected to a water body, part of a significant wetland natural community, or have rare species populations. When we do this update, we're also keeping all of the VSWI polygons that were created by permit decisions because these were delineations that were submitted. So the other way that we are adding wetlands to the VSWI is when we receive submittals with permit applications, as well as if anyone submits edit request, which both of those forms are up on our permit website that you can access. You can and you can submit that information to us and we'll consider it. This is just a screenshot of some of that pending work that we have here, where you see there's entire wetlands that have no VSWI associated with them that are going to be added. There's some that are VSWIs that are going to be modified to include additional wetland area, like you see here. And this was for clearly a right-of-way project that received a permit from us. We are updating them as we go. We are asking that people submit the polygons for us to upload them, which Kelsey and Ryan will be talking about very shortly. But it's important to know that this is how we're able to have a better mapping product, and it's really important for us to be able to receive this information. This isn't being noticed in most cases with the permit decision anymore because our rule update allowed us to have a bulk update process. We're hoping to do our next update, which has over 300 polygon additions from this past year and previous years of map submittals included in it, and we're hoping to have that update this February. So look on the environmental notice bulletin for updates on that. It will be noticed statewide. There will be a 30-day public notice period and an interactive map to be able to zoom into particular areas of interest to see where we're updating. So with that, I'll turn it over to Kelsey.
Hey everybody, thank you, Laura. I did put some of those links in the chat for everybody, and I think there's a couple more that I can add later also. So as Laura said, I do work closely with the Wetland program. I'm the admin assistant who helps with permit application review and also some of the Class 2 wetland mapping. And today I wanted to introduce everyone to how to create a wetland shapefile using the ANR Atlas or the VSWI. The VSWI is also part of that layer. It's just a more wetland specific layer. All right. So again, the VSWI is a tool created by the Wetland program and the ANR GIS team for public use. I have a little screenshot of it there. It's used to identify wetland areas, to make maps, and explore other natural resources in Vermont. And a unique feature of this layer is that you can create and export a shapefile from it. And then, as Laura kind of touched on as well, we in the Wetland program can then use those shapefiles that you, if you're a consultant, if you're providing it to us, to do some of our Class 2 wetland mapping. For those who don't know, a shapefile is a data storage format. It stores attributes, both physical and other, of geographic features. And I'll walk you through how to create one in our mapping layers. So the first thing that you need to do is navigate to the project location, again on the VSWI. I also included a link to the Atlas, which is just the main Atlas. They're very similar, and you can do these tasks in both layers. The first thing that you'll want to do is navigate to your location, click on the navigation tab across the top of your screen, and then you'll enter the project address into the project bar above Quick Tools. You can either hit the Enter key or click on the magnifying glass there, and then you'll receive some results on the left-hand side of your screen, which I have a little a screenshot of as well. And then you'll want to click on the arrows to expand those options, and then you'll be zoomed to your project location. The other options for that, if you don't have a 911 address available, is you can use the zoom to coordinate or zoom to span tool. I use these a lot in my work, especially if I have a span, because it can provide a more accurate location. So you have both of those tools also under the navigation tab. And similar to using the address field, you would enter your coordinates or your span, and then just hit the Enter key on your keyboard, and it will zoom you right to that location. From there, you're ready to start drawing your polygon. So I'll walk you through that step. First, you'll want to click on the tools icon. It'll show up in the right-hand corner of your mapping screen, and then that'll open the entire tools menu across the top there. In the lower photo here, I have the Draw tab highlighted. You'll want to click on the Draw tab, and that'll give you a lot of different options and tools for how to create a polygon. Some people prefer to use the polygon tool. I think that's pretty common. It allows you to click on the vertices of the wetland boundary to create a shape. I prefer to use the freehand shape in some cases, but you can use either, or anything else along there. To use the freehand tool, you would trace the wetland boundary and then let go of your mouse button when you're done, and that will create the shape. And actually, could you go to the next slide too, Laura? I think that one's yeah, there we go. So there's your list of drawing tools. Again, I have polygon highlighted. If you use polygon, you can click on the vertices of your the shape that you're trying to create, and then double click on the starting point once you get back to it, and it will auto-complete your polygon. So I have a example, probably not an accurate example at all, but just to show you how to create a polygon on that layer. I also discovered this the other day. I haven't used it much, but there's also an option to upload different file types and different data types to the map. And then you could use, let's say you have a delineation that is in another file type, a CSV, a KML, etc. You could import that file to the Atlas or the VSWI and then use that shape to, trace or however you want to do it to convert to a shapefile. I'm sure there are much easier ways to do that if you're using, say, ArcPro, but this tool might be useful too, so I did want to highlight it. To upload your data, you can click on the Map Data tab, and then on that Upload Data tool, it will then pop up a window that asks you to choose a file. So you can navigate to your file on your computer. And then once it is in that field, you can click Upload to upload it to the map. I don't have an example because I haven't really used this tool myself, but I just wanted to highlight it in case other people might find it useful. Once you have the polygon drawn on your map, you can also edit it from there. So to edit, click on the Edit tool, which is also under the Draw tab. From there, you'll see gray and white points around the outside of your polygon. Each of these points can be clicked on and moved. They can also be deleted, and you can also add new points. So this is a really great way to do some fine-tuning to your polygon as well. And then to stop editing, you can either click outside of the polygon on the map, or you can click the Edit tool again to deselect it and get out of that mode. And then the last step of the process would be to export your drawing. So once you have your polygon or your shape file, your shape complete, click on Export Drawings, and that will allow you to export the polygon as a shape file. And then a prompt will appear on the screen, just asking you to confirm that you would like to download it, and then you need to click OK to do that. And then the shapefile will be exported to your downloads folder. This is the default location. For most people, of course, this will be in the upper right-hand corner of your web browser. So to get to your downloads folder from there, you can click on that blue down arrow, and then you'll be able to see your zipped shapefile. I have an example shown there. The name will always be export.zip. There's just a 2 there because I had downloaded a couple of them that day for practice, but it will download as a zip file. Just make sure that if you are viewing the zip file, to not click on or modify any of the file extensions within the file, because that will make it so that you can't use, nobody can use the shapefile. It won't work properly. So once you have your exported file, you can name it anything that you'd like, save it anywhere on your machine, and then you can submit it to us in the wetland program if that's what you're trying to do with it. And the nice thing about these is, if you're working on a permit application and you're unsure, I always say, when in doubt, submit a shapefile anyway. This just helps us with our mapping, particularly if there's a determination included with the permit application. But even if there isn't and you have the data available, send it over. I'm sure that we'd be able to use it for other mapping in the future as well. And I think that's everything. If anybody has questions, you can leave them in the chat for me.
Thank you, Kelsey. That's a really great option for folks who do not have access to ArcGIS. And now Ryan will be speaking to kind of the preferred method for the wetlands program for us to receive wetland polygons. So take it away, Ryan.
Hi, everybody. I'm Ryan Knox, providing kind of GIS support for the Agency of Natural Resources. What I'm going to cover here kind of really, as Laura suggested, is kind of a preferred method. And I think when I say that, it's because it's easier for everybody. You can just go to the next slide. Yeah, to do this, your organization has to have an ArcGIS Online organizational account. If you don't know if your organization has that or not, you can kind of tell, if you interact with ArcGIS Online. At the bottom, I have an image there of that URL address. typically if you have an organization with ArcGIS Online, you kind of have this prefix maps.arcgis.com. That's just kind of a quick validation that, hey, I have an organization. So you need that. You need an ArcGIS member. So typically with ArcGIS Pro, you have to use some kind of member name and password to get entry into the software. That's your ArcGIS member account that you use. And then thirdly, you have to be a member of ANR's VSWI submittal group. Okay. I'm going to go into a little detail there, but those are really the 3 requirements. So if you check all those boxes, this is a great way to do your work. Next slide. These are just some screenshots for a kind of a future reference. I kind of assume we're going to be making this available later, just to give you some screenshots of how you can join that group. Okay. It's very simple. You just search VSWI submittal. There's some keys there. I always find out when you're in ArcGIS Online, you search for things, it seems to always want to default to your organization first. Obviously, we're not a part of your organization, so you have to toggle that little filter there to the left and shut it off and search. Next slide. Okay, when you do search VSWI submittal, I promise you will get this result back. Okay, it has a little description of what it is. And the key points here is it's viewable to the public and any organization's members can join it. Okay. Kind of want to define maybe what a group is in ArcGIS Online if you're not familiar with it. It's really just a way of organizing items and then sharing that content with members within ArcGIS. So, in this case, I want to share a layer that you all can contribute to. Okay, it's as simple as that. At the bottom here is a direct link to the group, and I think I can somebody put that in the chat? I'm not sure. I can't grab it because somebody else is sharing the screen, but that'd be great to put in the chat, because especially for you users on the call right now that you check all these boxes, you can click on that link and say join group. At that moment, I will accept the request, and you'll be a part of that group. Okay. Next slide. Is that it? Okay, good. I do. Okay. The content that I'm sharing with you is really just one feature layer. Okay. And that feature layer, once you're a part of the group, you can open a web map and start digitizing a polygon. Okay. And if you're a pro user, you can just, once you're a part of the group, you can just access the portal, My Groups, and add that layer right to your ArcGIS Pro project. Okay. One thing that's really cool about this setup is, there's a lot of configurations and options that we have with ArcGIS Online. And in general, what's great is you're only going to see your content based on the member that you signed in on. So just know that the content that you're providing is really just visible by you. Yeah, which is great. This is a direct way to get the information to our VSWI, our wetlands program directly. There's no exchange, there's no zipping up anything, there's no nothing. It just really is there for them to look at and kind of go through our approval process. Laura, what time does this go to?
Till 11.
Oh, great. So we have some time. I think I can just do a quick little screen share and just kind of show you some things.
Yeah, sure. I'll stop sharing.
Cool. All right. So it's kind of hard to reproduce your experience because I'm signed in, obviously, in ArcGIS Online, and I'm a part of the group. But like if you were to go just to kind of your home, right, at the top, this is ArcGIS Online, by the way. And those of you familiar with ArcGIS Online, you have a member account, you can sign in. You're familiar with this interface. But here's just a search right here. So right here, I can search all of ArcGIS Online for anything. If you guys aren't familiar with ArcGIS Online, and I know I'm mentioning it a lot, it's like a Google search. It's the largest repository of geographic data ever, right? I mean, it just is. So you can search here. It's like a Google search. You can just kind of use the information to kind of make a decision on what direction you want to go and what you want to use. So I'm going to type in VSWI submittal. Okay. Now, if you were in your organization, you know, this is that little toggle button that I was talking about, right? I'm going to do that. And then I'm going to search groups. Okay, this isn't content. What I want you to do is join a group. So I'm going to hit that. There's the group. I can look at some details, right? And then look at that. We already have a couple people that have submitted requests, which is perfect. Thank you. So you're going to have a big button right here that says join this group. Okay, and these two people have already done it. Brock, hey Brock, how's it going? I'm going to approve this for Brock, and I'm going to approve it for Carla. Okay. Now, that's all great. Now, when you join the group, you're going to see that it has some content. I mean, it's as simple as just opening this map viewer. If I wanted to use an online map to digitize things, this is just an example polygon that I added. I'm not going to get too far into like editing in this environment. This isn't really the appropriate time to do that, but there is just an edit button down here that I can use to digitize a new feature. Okay. All right, so that's a quick rundown there. Now I'm going to show you, well, how the hell do I get, sorry, how do I get this information in ArcGIS Pro? Okay, so if you're not familiar with ArcGIS Pro, you know, this is just a map in ArcGIS Pro. I have some very simple things over here to the left. And on the right, I have Arc Catalog, which is how you kind of get access to information. And at the top here, there's something called the portal, okay? The portal is really ArcGIS Online. It's kind of the same terminology. I mean, portal is actually something very different than ArcGIS Online, but anyways, go to the portal tab, okay? And you'll notice here, there's kind of a toggle between content and groups. I mean, I can certainly search VSWI here and maybe get some results, but I just want to show you how it's organized. If I go to groups, right, I'm going to search my groups. Well, conveniently, it's at the top, but I can search my groups and just type in VSWI. And obviously, I have a number of groups that we're using for different reasons. One of them is VSWI submittal. Now, you're going to get this in your Pro project when you're a part of the group, okay? I'm opening this up. You can see that there's a feature layer here. I'm going to open that up just to give you just a little more information. So this is the layer that you're going to be adding to, right? So I can click on this and say add to current map. And then similar to that web map I was showing, you know, this is where you get into creating the features in ArcGIS Pro. And then, you know, this is a shared resource with our wetlands program, so they'll be able to get that information, you know, as soon as you're done with it, which is great. I will maybe open up the attribute table just to kind of give you an idea of what's included here. It's a pretty simplified schema. I don't think it's very complicated. There's NWI code, VSWI class, you know, mapping date, notes, and then these fields here, if you're a GIS technical person, it's just really just feature tracking. So like when you create it, it's going to get time stamped. Your ArcGIS member is going to be included in the creator text field, which is great. It's just kind of tracking it back to who created the information. I also want to point out that, you know, there is a list of NWI codes. And in the feature layer, I've included that. So I'm just going to add that as well. Please use this code definition for typing your wetlands. These are the valid codes from the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. There's a ton of them, but it's a understand what that is. And at this point, I'll just digress, and I think, open it up to any questions that people might have, for all of us, that is.
Thanks, Ryan. That was a great
Sure.
demo. We're really excited to have this ArcGIS Online feature tool because it's really slick for our staff to be able to just get the information already in ArcGIS and pulling it into our edit layer for changes to the Vermont Significant Wetlands Inventory. What we are finding when we get submittals of just plain old shape files emailed to us, sometimes they're in the wrong,
Projection.
Projection, thank you.
Sure.
Wrong projections. It's in South America or something. And, this is a way to just make sure that the data that you're giving speaks with our versions as well. So I will now put a plug-in for folks to enter comments and questions in the chat. Raise your hand. I'll look at what's in the chat as well. I've added that we have another webinar coming up in April. That's in the chat. You can sign up today for that. And I will also add in the chat a feedback form so you can provide us with helpful feedback on this webinar. So let's look in the chat here. Oh, hi, Kelsey. So Aaron was asking about when and how the National Wetlands Inventory will be added to the national layer for the Lamoille River Basin. And that was submitted in December. And I know that the National Wetlands Inventory has like 1 or 2 updates a year. So Aaron, I can follow up with you on when their next update is planned so that you have that information. And we can also share with you that layer once it's available too. This isn't, it's still going through the process of being added onto the Vermont Significant Wetlands Inventory, and we understand that there might be a little bit of a lag time between when we have an NWI product and when we have it for VSWI, so we can make that available. Let's see if there are other questions. I'm not seeing any at the moment. Thanks so much, Ryan and Kelsey, for presenting on how to submit a shape file. This will be really useful either, for the folks who are submitting permit applications who are on the call. They certainly need to know a method of doing this, but we also encourage people to just submit the data that they have from prior delineations that we can put up on the maps. And this is also useful for all of you. If you have your delineation information up there, your clients will be able to look back on it in the future if they have other projects, instead of having it stored away in a file that they might not be able to find in 10 years from now. It's also really useful if you're scoping a project for doing a new delineation, because we do need new delineations every 5 years for permitting purposes. And this would really help you scope out just how much time you might need to be on a parcel if you know what wetlands were found there previously. So we're uplifting the whole community by adding this mapping here. Okay, we have a question from Isabel. If we are already mapped in the Atlas, but I ground truth a larger wetland area, is this something that could be sent to you all? Yes, certainly. So if something is mapped and it is different from what you saw on the ground, like say the wetland extends another 1,000 feet to the west, as a narrower finger and such, we do want that information. If it's like a bit of a wiggle of like 10 feet, we won't be prioritizing making those types of updates, but certainly if there's more wetland or significantly less wetland, we would want to change that on the mapping. And Glenn, I see you have your hand raised. Go ahead and unmute yourself.
Hi there. I just got a question. If we just have lines, if we go out in the field, delineate a wetland, and we just have a line feature instead of a polygon, do you want us to try to estimate the extent of the wetland on that line when we get back into the office? Or would you just rather see the line feature that we have?
For submittals, we really like it as a closed polygon, so we can copy and paste it into our layer for addition. And even better to be doing that through the method that Ryan was showing, because you can add all of the attributes in there. I understand a lot of the shape files that we receive on projects, and especially from VTrans when you're looking at a narrow corridor, is there's a truncated end of the wetland because that's the extent of your review area, and that's okay. It looks a little awkward, but that's something that we can add onto the map so the wetland's at least recognized in that area. And if our staff have the time, they might use a bit of aerial interpretation to find additional area of wetland that's adjacent to it to have it a more complete polygon. So we do prefer polygons, though, to answer your question.
Okay, and could you just put arrows maybe at the end of your line features, just saying it extends out that way, just as a helpful guide to your staff?
Well, I think, Kelsey, you've seen a lot of arrows and mapping, so maybe you have something to say about that piece. And I think that it might be more useful putting that as a comment in the notes of the attributes, but I'll let Kelsey speak to that.
Sure. Yes, I do receive quite a few shape files, or we, I guess, for a team, that have an arrow kind of showing where the wetland extends. I would say it's better to have it than just a line, because sometimes it can be difficult to tell which way the wetland's going, so that can be helpful. But then we still do, have to try to estimate where the wetland boundary is and everything and close that polygon. So as Laura said, if you can close a polygon, that's helpful, even if you're just estimating or, visually where that boundary is. But an arrow, I would say, is better than not having one, personally. It can be confusing to some of our staff who are newer at mapping, but I'm trying to help with that situation. So, yeah.
Okay. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
We'd love to have more transportation agency mapping, Glenn, for sure. You guys have a large footprint on the landscape, so every little bit helps. Aaron asks, do you require wetland delineation by a professional wetland scientist to approve that wetland for addition to the Vermont Significant Wetlands Inventory? No, there's no certification requirement on there. for our permitted projects, we are doing ground truthing of those areas for permitting purposes. So there has been a check by our district ecologist. And, you know, also a lot of this mapping is done originally from aerial interpretation. So mapping that might not be as precise as a delineation may still be more acceptable for the sake of addition to a broader scale mapping product than for permitting purposes. I see a hand raised from Amy. Go ahead and unmute yourself.
Hi. How long does it usually take for you guys to add the delineation shape files to the maps? And does it make a difference whether you receive them through like permit application or otherwise?
When we have a permit application, we will be reaching out and asking for a polygon to be submitted. So we are asking for it at the time of the submittal. If it's not included, then if it is included with that, that's reducing an added step. So that's really helpful. We're gaining more bench strength within our division to do more of this mapping, more in real time. We have quite a backlog all the way out to 2013 that we're working through. So you might see some permits from the past, the wetlands being added on the next update. And they won't be updated in real time. It'll be on, we're hoping for a quarterly basis, and this next update, which has a ton of mapping from 2023, is going to be put on notice this month. Kristen asked, in the event of mapping, does the department go out and perform delineations to more accurately depict these wetland areas? Is this something the department needs assistance with in terms of locating field data with survey equipment? Thanks, Kristen. So when we're receiving or working on these national wetlands inventory, which are primarily through it's through aerial interpretation, the methodologies that's set out by the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, we are doing ground truthing where we're able to get permission or where we're able to look at things by the road and such. And there have been a few groups that have reached out about helping out with this. So Kristen, we can certainly follow up with you to see if you have any ability to add to our list of ground truth sites. And yeah, we do, we're not using survey grade equipment for this. We're using the GPS available on our phones to do spot checks to ensure that the area isn't to delineation quality, but is to the standards of the National Wetlands Inventory. Great question. Okay, well, we are at time now. Thank you so much for staying to learn about wetland mapping in the state of Vermont. We're very excited to be getting these larger updates. Again, please fill out the survey or the feedback form. Sign up for our webinar in April, and Thank you to Ryan and Kelsey for helping me out today. And thank you all who have submitted or will be submitting wetlands for improving our mapping of the state. Have a great day and happy World Wetlands Day, everyone. Thank you. And this recording will be posted up on YouTube once it goes through its processing. Have a good day.